Chapter 18. The storm was different this time. The swells grew in size at a regular rate, and the wind began to increase, but started slowly and worked up to a steady growing pace. And David was different now. He was not panicking, banging around to stow gear below. His mind was steady, his thoughts careful and even. "We're going to get hit," he said aloud, calmly talking to the frog. "Let's get ready." He let her stop. The sails slacked and went down into the cabin and strung cord from a drawer to a drawer to keep them from coming out. Then he lowered the leaves on the table and tied them down, drank some water, tightened the front hatch, and went back up. The wind had increased in strength. He climbed onto the cabin and reefed the main down to half size, but left the jib full. Then he went back to the helm, brought her around, and the sails filled with the frog started taking the swells. There were waves coming now as well, on top of the swells, growing in chop and intensity every moment. The frog was slamming, making noise, but he held her angled up into the wind and took it. Spray came over the bow and covered him, soaking him, but he didn't think he could leave again now, and he took it as well. He would not let her do it alone again, not let the sea have her again. Dawn showed. A mean gray sea headed up into the leading gray clouds, and a wind that moaned through the stays and riggings. Gust hits now, like body blows taking her over, but he worked the helm, let her ease up, held her off the wind again, and kept the speed between 5 and 6 knots. Did not run from the storm, but into it, used it, rolled with it, and absorbed it. The wind became worse. The waves grew until they were larger than the swells that rose on, towering over him, burying the bow. More than once he was knocked off his feet by a wall of water coming back over the side of the cabin, but he never let go of the helm, rose and took it again and again, held her through the wave after wave. When they rose over him, walls of water, mountains of water, moving down on him, down on the frog. They took it, all that day, slamming, rising, heeling, skidding, slamming, down on him again and again, over and over and down in the gale. At one point he snarled, growled at the wind and sea, the helm in his gut, his arms aching, his legs on fire. They took it until late day, when it seemed to change. Felt that the storm was whipped. It had thrown everything it had at them and was now passing. Inside an hour, the wind had lowered from a shriek, and the top of the waves weren't being blown over so hard. In another hour, just before dusk, the main force of the gale was well past them. The waves settled, and the wind became good and steady force. He raised the mainsail again to full size and found that she pointed higher, yet into the wind, so that he could go a little north of northwest. And he was thinking that felt good to be aimed more for home, and was thinking it would be wonderful if he could head straight north and just get home before he ran out of food, however far it was, and thinking of his parents and home and food and the wind and the sea and the storm, and how he felt good that he and the frog had taken the storm the way they did together. It was then that he saw the ship, a small older ship coming out of the dusk, aiming almost at him, but slightly off its bow, running with the wind and sea. Right there, a ship, right in front of him. She had been running without lights, but as soon as the people on deck saw him, there were 3 of them, they yelled, and the lights came on, and they started to pass not 100 yards away, the people waving and yelling and laughing. For a moment he couldn't say anything. He just didn't think he would happen this way. He didn't know for certain how it would happen, but not this way, not so sudden. Suddenly, he was saved. She was an old, very small coastal freighter, but had been fixed up and repainted, and she carried an American flag over her bridge. "Hey," he croaked. They were going to pass him and leave if he didn't wake up. "Hey, hey, hey." He let go of the helm and waved with both arms, screaming, pointing at them, and then at himself, and at last they got the message, and he heard the engines in the freighter rumble down to a stop west and slightly north of him. He came about and let the frog sail closer, came up into the wind, and stopped about 30 yards away, rising and settling on the waves and swells. He looked at the people on the rail. "My name is David Alspeth," he yelled. "I was driven out to sea in a storm." "It's him," one of the young men yelled at the bridge of the ship. "It's that kid they were searching for off of Ventura." He looked back down at David. "They had your picture in the paper and everything. Man, you are one heck of a distance from where they looked. They finally gave you up for dead. You know that?" "Well, I'm not," David thought. "I'm not dead, not even close." "Where am I?" The man laughed. "About halfway down the coast of Baja, maybe 250 miles south of San Diego." Another man came from the bridge, stepping down the ladder and stand at the rail over the frog. "I am Pierce, Henry Pierce. I am the captain." David introduced himself. He almost added that he was the captain of the frog, but let it be. Captain Pierce was a heavy man with round shoulders, gray hair, and pleasant eyes. It would sound cocky, smart-mouthed to say that he, David, was captain of the frog, but he felt like it. "You gave everybody a rough time," the captain said. "They had planes and choppers looking for you." "I was driven way south by the storm, David explained. "Way south." "Well, you're all right now. We're down here to study whales, but we're headed back tomorrow. We'll have you home in 3 or 4 days." David closed his eyes, sighed, and leaned back against the boom with his shoulder. That was it, then. He was done. He was saved. In 3 to 4 days, he'd be home, and there'd be a malt and a hamburger and his mom and his dad. "Get your gear," the captain interrupted his dreaming. "Anything you want to bring, and you'll lower a ladder for you." David looked up at him. "What about the frog? What about the boat?" The captain hesitated. "Well, we'll have to leave it." "Nope." It came out before he could think. Just the word no. The captain of the research vessel shrugged. "We haven't any choice. I haven't got any way to lift it aboard or place to put it. If we did, it's too big." "No," David shook his head. "We could tow her." A small smile, a sad smile. "We couldn't pull it more than 2 or 3 knots, and then it would probably tear the boat apart. Sailboats don't tow at all." There was a pause. The frog rolled in the swells. The captain stared down at him, the small smile still on his lips. David looked back up at him, but wasn't seeing him, wasn't seeing anything. His mind rolled with memories. The sharks, the killer whales, the storm, the moon pouring down on the sails, the dolphins spinning up into the gold. All of it in his mind. Then the sentence came. "Leave the frog." We leave her to float and die on the oceans, alone. Leave her to drift and die alone on the ocean? No. "What do you mean, no?" the captain asked. David shook his head. "I won't leave her. I won't leave the frog." "But there's no other way. I'll sail her." There it was out. "I'll sail her home myself. I won't leave her to die, to sink, alone. I'll go back with her. You know it's 350 miles back to Ventura against prevailing winds and current. You'll have to tack the whole way. It would take 2-3 weeks more if you hit bad weather." David rubbed the wooden broom with one hand. The wood felt warm, smooth, alive. She was alive. The ship had blocked most of the wind, but enough flurried around to make the frog's sail flap and a bit, and then jerk the broom gently. There was no other way. I got here with her, and I'm going home with her. That's it. Another long silence while the captain studied him, frowning. A gull, which had been following the ship, screeched and flew over, banking on a wind eddy. "I'd do the same," the captain said at last, abruptly nodding. "By God, I'd do the same." "Well, is there anything we can do for you, young sailor?" David thought for a moment. "2 things. First, can you call my parents by radio or something and tell them I'm all right and that I'll be home? Well, whenever I get there. Explain everything to them." He gave the captain their phone number. "Done. And the second thing is food and fuel for my stove. I don't have much food left." Before he could finish speaking, the other people on the boat, the whale researchers, who had been standing silent all this time, started running in different directions, and in 10 or 15 minutes had arranged a huge bundle of food and supplies on him, a blanket which they tied together and lowered to him into the cockpit of the frog. David saw one can peeking through a corner as he put the heavy bundle below in the cabin. The label said it contained a canned chicken, a whole chicken in one can. He put a lot of extra goodies. A girl yelled down laughing, "Be careful, you don't get fat." There's also 5 gallons of water in a plastic jug. David thanked them and talked a little more. The captain told him to stand well off from the shore, perhaps 100 miles, to get good, steady wind. And then it was done. The captain went back up to the bridge. The engines changed their pitch, and the ship slid away into the dusk. As soon as it was clear, the wind hit the Frog, and David was busy for a few moments, trimming the sail and getting her going. And when he turned, he could no longer see the ship except lights on her radar mast. He waved once, though. He knew they couldn't see it, and returned to work. He would have to get below and put the food away, straighten the cabin up, and get everything tight. But the wind was even now a steady force, and the sea was becoming smaller, so the sailing wasn't rough, and the Frog hummed to him through the tiller, and a song from the water that told him he could stow the food later. Now there was the wind, and the sea, and the Frog. He had some sailing to do. This is the end of The Frog, The Voyage of the Frog by Gary Paulsen.